All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming. Thanks for being a little patient. Sorry, I was running a little bit behind. Welcome to the Laravel Austin Meetup for November. You've got me, myself, and I this time. Terry is at the moment overseas in India at our Bangalore office, so I'm sorry, you just got to deal with me, but I think I'll make it work for a while. So, not a lot on the calendar for this month or next. So next week we have like a PHP meetup. Definitely recommend you go. One of my coworkers is actually going to be giving a talk at next week's meetup and is actually talking on a topic very similar to the one I'll be talking about tonight.
What's he talking about?
He's going to be talking about basically the same thing, the active record versus data mapper or doctrine. But he's going to be doing it in a more outside the framework sense versus mine's more Laravel specific. So he's just one layer upward. So yeah, next week's PHP meetup. I just liked it so much, let's do it twice apparently. And then next month is the Austin Web Bash on December 8th. We are probably not going to have a meetup for December, much like Austin PHP, and instead we're just going to kind of funnel everybody towards the Austin Web Bash because it's kind of like you get together for all the Austin tech meetup groups at Buffalo Billiards. Both floors are going to be completely ours from 7 to 9. Drinks are, I don't think, free. I don't know all the details yet. They kind of delay with releasing all the information. The most I know is it's December 8th from the 7th to the 9th. But once they officially announce it with all the details, I'll be sure to send out the Eventbrite, whatever. Sign up if you'd like to join. Would love to see you all there. I'll be there for sure. So yeah, that's really all we got for the calendar. It's kind of a slow, oh no. Okay, now I get why I had Austin PHP meetup twice because I forgot to edit the other thing. We have a conference actually that's going to be in Austin from November 18th through the 20th. It's the API Strata conference. So if your company is looking to do work with REST APIs or it has a REST API at the moment and is trying to kind of figure out where to go with it, how to design, like make it better, things like that. Highly recommend going to the conference. A lot of good speakers there. I plan on going, at least. There is through the Austin PHP meetup, we actually do have a discount for the conference, which makes the tickets a lot better priced. So if you're interested, just let me know afterwards and I can be sure to get that link over to you and hope to see some of you all there. But now, we get to the main attraction, my talk for this evening, which is going to be, excuse me, thank you, Eric. Auckland versus Doctrine 2, aka the active record pattern versus the data mapper pattern. So, I'm sure most of y'all are aware, but in case you're not, both of those patterns are considered ORMs, which are object relational mappings. It's a program technique for converting database data into basically an object in PHP or whatever language you're working in so that you can keep doing the whole object-oriented programming thing inside of your application. Before we had ORMs, we had some very, very unfun things, but this is kind of like an example of ORM. We have like a row in a database table, ID, username, first name, created at, updated at. And this example uses Eloquent. The syntax would be different depending on the ORM you're using, but you would find the user by the ID, one in this case. Okay, I guess that just disconnected for whatever reason. Give me a second. Technical difficulties song right about now. Okay. Sorry about that. But user fine. Really? right, since it doesn't want to cooperate, we're going over here. Gotta love technology, right? Perfect.
When it works.
Yeah, when it works, technology is great. When it doesn't, it's a pain. But so you'd use your ORM, Eloquent in this example, user find one, passing it the auto-incrementing ID, and in the background it would run something like a select all from users if it inferred the table name from the class name. And it would map all the database columns you see on the left to properties on the object that you could then echo out, manipulate, etc. In this case, I just kind of echoed it out to give you an idea of how it translates from your database layer to a object in PHP. Now, before our ORMs, we had something like this. You used MySQL I. If you were in older versions of PHP, it'd be MySQL, which didn't have the fancy bindings. You just passed a raw MySQL query in and hoped you didn't have SQL injections. So in the same example, we're select star from users where ID equals question mark. We're binding that question mark to be 1 in this case, executing the statement, getting the results, and then running a while loop for as many rows as we can get from that result set and echoing the row array. And this time we chose to set it up as an associative array. The default option, it's just a 0 indexed array, and you just have to remember, okay, row at 0 is the auto-incrementing ID, I hope. And, well, that's not fun anymore. So thankfully we have ORMs to kind of map data to objects in PHP. So let's start with the active record pattern, which if you're using Laravel, you're probably very familiar with. It's what Eloquent follows. It's an architectural pattern that stores in-memory object data in relational database. It was coined by Martin Fowler in his book, Patterns of Enterprise Application Architecture. And when you're using active record, which you've probably seen with Eloquent, your domain object and all your business logic and your data persistence layer are one and the same, which has its pros and cons. For example, it's very easy to use. You just user find 1 and you get the user with ID 1, and if you need to update properties, you just set, say, the first name property to whatever, Joe, and then just call user save, and then immediately runs a SQL query in the background to update the user table, set the first name to Joe where ID equals 1. Awesome. It's great. It's super easy to use. On the negative side, because they're so coupled together, it makes testing quite difficult. And people have built a lot of testing tools to make it easier, but that coupling together makes it a bit difficult to use. Thankfully, we're using Laravel, and Otwell has taken that into consideration and made Eloquent very easy to test, but that's not the same for every single ORM that follows the active record pattern. But as I said, Eloquent follows it. So we have our user class that extends the Eloquent model. It takes the table name based on the class name. So for example, for the user class, its table name is just the pluralized version of the class name, users, all lowercase. You can override a protected table property on the class, which will allow you to set the table to something else. Maybe you have a database scheme where the user's table is you, for example. I don't know why you would do that. I'm not saying we at my company have a table name like that. I mean, that'd be crazy, but it can happen. And you don't want to have a U model because no one knows what the heck a U model is. So you can make a user model, set the table to something that's not just as simple as take the class name and pluralize it, and everything will still work. In this example, app user find 1, which would run the query in the background, select star from users where ID equals 1. I'm setting the username to Brandon Hunter, my full first name, and then I'm running save, which just immediately updates the table, sets my first name to Brandon Hunter, good to go. Super simple, easy, you've got your database interaction, just all right there out of the box. And Eloquent has a bit of a query builder. So if you want to get all the users that have been confirmed, like they confirmed their email address, order them by their first name, and you only want 10 of them, you can run the following query at the bottom of the example, and you'll get a Illuminate collection object that is full of the first 10 user objects from your database that match the criteria of the query you constructed. So, as you can see, very simple to use, and if you're using Laravel currently, you're probably using Eloquent to map your database data into objects that you can work with in PHP. On the other side of the table is the data mapper pattern, which is yet another architectural pattern, also coined by Martin Fowler. I don't know how he has the ability to name things so easily, but I'm jealous because I can't name things at all. It's in the same book. If you want to check it out, it's on Amazon. It's pretty decently priced.
Yeah, it's a good book.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't had a chance to read a lot of it myself, but I keep seeing it pop up, and it's definitely something I want to look at in more detail. But a data mapper is a lot different from Active Record. It is a data access layer that's responsible for performing bidirectional transfer of data between your database and your PHP objects. And the main difference is when you have a user class or entity, as data mappers or doctrine likes to call it, it is just a plain PHP object with private or protected properties, or public if that's just how you like to make them, and getters and setters. And that's it. It doesn't know anything about the database. It just knows that it has A through C properties, and that's it. On the other side, there's an entity manager that's responsible for maintaining the persistence layer. So it will go find the data from the database and map the properties onto your data objects, or the POPO it's called, plain old PHP object, and vice versa. Take that PHP object and translate it into queries that need to be ran against the database. Excuse me. What's nice about it is it keeps your data representation and your data persistent layers separate of each other. So it becomes very, very easy to test your entity or domain objects and the behavior that they're supposed to exhibit, because you don't have to mock a ton of database calls to it. You can just pass it in the data that it would receive from the database and then test the behavior it's supposed to exhibit on that data. So in this talk, we're going to be highlighting Doctrine 2 as our main example, especially the Laravel Doctrine package. So once again, emulating our user Eloquent object, this is what a user would look like in Doctrine 2. We're using the annotations metadata mapper. So in this case, we're annotating that the user is an entity, what table it's supposed to use, the users table, as well as that the ID column, or the ID property on the user is the ID column in the database. If you make a new user and save it, the annotation at ORM generated value knows that it's supposed to generate that value based on what the database tells you. And then you can also specify the column type. In this case, it's an automatic ID, it's an integer, username's a string. You can specify your created and updated columns as PHP date times, and it'll automatically convert that for you, etc. And then using it is just simple as new up a user, set the username to like our Twitter @handle, for example, Laravel Austin, and then you just pass it into the entity manager through persist and then flush. Persist and flush is the key part to actually interacting with the database. As soon as you pass that user object into persist, it is maintained within the entity manager as a object that needs to be saved or updated in the database. And as soon as you call flush, it will run the database queries necessary to persist all the data passing to the entity mapper. You can pass the user object into flush to tell it to only flush that particular object. But if you say have a user object and a post object and whatever other objects in the entity manager when you call flush, it would persist all those objects and their changes or creations into the database through something that they call the unit of work, which is a very interesting concept to data mappers. It allows them to do the most like performant SQL, if you're using MySQL query possible, to store the data into the database, and it's transactional. So if you need to create a user object along with like 3 other objects that are dependent on each other for making it in there, you persist the user object and those 3 other objects, you call flush and it will start a transaction, run all the inserts for everything, and then if everything succeeds, run the commit. And your data's in there, good to go, transactionally safe. And if one of those fails, then it fails out and doesn't save the data accordingly.
PHP Storm failed.
Oh, cool. Thank you, PHP Storm. So you can also use the entity manager to find an object, and you pass it in the string of the class name. You can do the full, if it's not namespace, you just pass in user. You can pass in the full namespace string or the fully qualified class name. You can even use the class name, : class syntax to do this, as well as the ID of find. So in this case, we're pretending the new user we just persisted got the ID of 2, and we're bringing it back out of the database, echoing its username, in this case Laravel Austin, but then we're changing it to Laravel ATX because we think the username sounds cooler. And then later on in our code, we find that same user from the entity manager again, which you may think means it's going to re-query the database and grab that user out, map to an object, and return it to you. That's not the case, actually. What it does is whenever you find an object, it actually keeps an internal map of what objects it's already located, so that if you need that object again, it's not going to run a database query again. It's going to pull that object out of its internal mapping, which is nice because if you modify it, it knows of those changes that you made to the model. So in this example, if you find it again and save it to a different variable and compare the usernames from the both of them without persisting the change after set username, they're going to both be the same username. So it internally in just PHP land keeps track of the changes you made, even if you haven't persisted and flushed them yet to the database, which is very handy in the event that you don't want to necessarily pass a user object through like 20 or so different classes. The entity manager can still find the same object you're expecting later on down the line. Now, I'm sure or at least most of us have heard of the repository pattern. It's big, it's one of the buzzwords that usually gets thrown around with Laravel and Laracast and everything PHP. But repositories, if you don't know, are basically mediator between the domain and the data mapping layers and applications. So you have a lot of domain objects, you've got data in the database, but you still need to manipulate that data for whatever business logic you have. A repository is a good place to kind of mediate some of that logic so that at the end of the day, your controller, for example, is just saying, hey, article repository, I would like all the posts that are published. And the controller does not care what it takes to get those articles that are published. It just wants a collection of articles that are considered published. Your repository knows what it needs to be published, and it handles it and maps it to the objects and goes from there. And you can use both active record and the data mapper pattern with both. There are just some very slight differences that you'll encounter using both of them with a repository pattern. When you use active record, or Eloquent in Laravel's case, with the repository pattern, you actually wind up with a leaky abstraction. And that is just due to the fact of how active record is, well, created. It's how active record works. So in our example, you would call the user repository find, which may map to just the Eloquent user model's find method of find ID of 1, and it returns the Eloquent object, which is fine. You do whatever you need to for the object, update username, first name, last name, email, etc., etc. And you might have logic in your repository to handle the saving of that data to the database, as well as, they updated their email address. Maybe we need to send them an email because it's a banking application. We need to let them know, hey, you just updated your information. If you didn't do that, click this link to undo it and recover your account. Things like that. The problem is, since it's an active record object, at any point in time in your application's flow, somebody can call the save method and save data to the database, and you may not know about it. Which is fine if you're the only user, or not the only user, the only developer of the code base, because you know, okay, I can't save it here, I gotta wait till it gets here. But if you add another developer that doesn't know that, they may just write a feature and it has a save just randomly in the code base. And suddenly you have no idea what the state of that object is or what it is in the database, and it causes issues down the line. Maybe, it doesn't always, but it's still leaky abstraction that could lead to issues down the line. Now with the data mapper pattern, you have a more true implementation, and I say true quotations because the PHP level of the programming community is still trying to find their way with programming patterns and seems to fight over which one's the best every day of the week on Twitter. But with data mapper, if you do user repository find one, you're going to get that user object or entity from Doctrine, but that's it. It doesn't know how to save itself. All it has is getters and setters of, hey, I want the username. Hey, I need to change the username. Set username, blah. And then after that, if you want to save it, you have to actually pass it to a update function, for example, to actually save the changes to the user object to your database. And then you can handle your usual business logic, sending emails, et cetera, there. Excuse me. Kind of showed this off earlier with Eloquent, but both Eloquent and Doctrine 2 come with their own flavor of a query builder. I'm sure if we're building applications here in Laravel, we're familiar with the Laravel's query builder or Eloquent's built-in query builder. But just in case, here's a bit of a refresher, the previous example from Eloquent. And the query winds up running in the background. It's just star from users where confirmed equals 1. It'll auto-convert true to 1 depending on the grammar you're using. So if you're using MySQL, there is no true and false. It's just 1 and 0 in MySQL. But if you're using Postgres, you can actually have Boolean columns with true and false. So it will automatically handle the conversion for that when you build the query. Order by first name, limit 10. Simple. You get back Illuminate collection object, which has tons of fancy methods on it if you're using Laravel 5.1. And inside that collection is all the user objects that actually match the criteria of the query. Pretty simple, very easy to use. This query builder is available outside of Eloquent as well. The only difference is if you're using it outside of Eloquent, you're getting arrays of just plain PHP standard objects. Unless you change the PDO effects node to an associative array, then you get an array of array objects. Just depends on what flavor you want to work with. The default is an array of standard class objects. Doctrine's query builder is a bit different. Excuse me. Doctrine is a query builder that's primarily exposed to its repository classes, because Doctrine actually has some default entity repository classes that it comes baked in with, and then you can write your own custom ones if you need more logic than just find or find by. But it also has something called the Doctrine Query Language, or DQL. And it's more of an object query language than a typical SQL language. So, for example, instead of select star from the user table where, in our previous example, you're actually selecting it off of the entity object that you've defined. So you'd select U from user, which you alias to U, where U.confirmed, the other difference, the U dot is a path to the property on the class itself, not in the table. So U.confirmed equals 1, order by U.first name, ascending limit 10. And that will give you back a Doctrine collection of your user entity objects when you call query get results. And you also have the ability to set named or just numerical parameters. So the second example, we're doing u.confirmed equals :confirmed, and then you're just sending the parameter of confirm to true. And when you run get results, it equals the same query. Excuse me. So in my example, I kind of kept the property on the user entity the same as what it would be in the database, first_name, but if you're following, say, PSR2, that property would probably be first name, capital N name, and then in your annotations or your YAML or XML declaration of how the properties map to the database columns, you would say, okay, if I'm looking for first name, the column in the database is first_name. Whenever you specify this path, it knows to look up in the user metadata for what that the column declaration is, and it converts that on the fly. So you basically are querying based on the PHP object versus the actual SQL language. Still the same syntax, just the slight differences, which is actually very powerful, because if you do things like joins and all that, it will automatically know what object is which in the join and map it accordingly. So if you're getting users and you're joining their post with that query, then it will map all the posts for each user that you query for to that post object. So maybe you have a user object, and in that object you have a method of getPost, which returns a collection of the post objects that they've written. If you manually query with a join, it'll do all that for you. It'll return back your array of users, and inside of that user will have the array of post objects, all from the database, good to go. It knows how to map it accordingly based on the metadata from the object, which is pretty impressive. Active Record can pull off the same things, and Eloquent especially. The syntax is a bit different, and it doesn't run on joins. It does more of, for example, you get your user by ID 1, and you also want to, in this case, eager load their post. What Eloquent does on the back end is select star from post, where user ID in, and then just 1 is in that inquiry, and then it takes all the posts that match that query, maps it to the Active Record object, sets it to the user object's magic property, and everything works, and it's awesome. The syntax is great. But it's a select star wherein, which, depending on how much data you have in the database, whereins could wind up being costly down the line, especially if you're saying, hey, give me these 50 users and also eager load all their posts. So then it's doing a select star from post where user ID in 50 user IDs. And if you're not limiting that, then you're suddenly getting possibly hundreds of posts per user in one just like PHP language call, and that could possibly cause issues for your database, depending on a lot of factors. If you're not indexed correctly, if your database server is not the most powerful box that ever existed, things like that. But joins are a little bit more performant than select stars wherein. So you're probably thinking, all right, cool, these are some very awesome patterns, and it's nice to see kind of two sides of the fence, but well, when the heck do I use them? That is not something that I can tell you definitively. The best I can tell you is if you're doing a small project, like over the weekend, like, oh, I want to make this thing for fun, I'll start it Friday, and by Sunday it's up on the web, good to go, and I'm just going to fix bugs on it, and whatever. You probably don't need doctrine. You're probably going to be just fine using something like Eloquent. It gets it done, it gets it out the door, you've built an application, you're good to go, you feel good about yourself, maybe you even made some money, depending on the type of application you made. It's great. If you're building a bigger application, not necessarily enterprise, but if you're building something bigger that's going to last for a long time and needs a lot of like structure, adherence to patterns, things like that with multi-teams, then data mapper may be the way you want to look. Not saying Active Record doesn't work. There are a lot of companies that have used Active Record and are doing just fine. Like Eric's using it. Basecamp in Rubyland, I'm pretty certain is using the active record pattern for their application. And last time I heard, they're making pretty decent profit and they're doing good. So by no means, and what am I telling you is the like concrete word of the land. But you may want to look at Data Mapper, the bigger your application gets, as a possible option.
I was discussing Active Record and Data Mapper with a Ruby developer, and it came to my attention that he believed that Ruby invented Active Record because their ORM is called Active Record, and he just didn't know that it was a pattern in Fowler's book. He just thought that that's what Ruby's ORM is, and it's Active Record, and everybody else copied it.
Yeah, I mean, Ruby likes to think it made a lot of things. Active Record is one of them. But no, I mean, the confusion happens. I mean, CodeIgniter, if you've had the unfortunate misfortune of using CodeIgniter in the past, it's Query Builder / ORM is called Active Record, which is basically their own flavor of Active Record. It's nothing like Active Record traditionally. It's not okay. So,
well, it was built in a different time of PHP, though.
This is true.
Before PHP had some of the features that make Laravel's eloquent so awesome.
This is very true. So I guess I can't harp on CodeIgniter that badly.
Yeah, there's a new version too, and I don't get into language wars, but you can put things together really quick with it.
You can.
And if you want to make some money without all the added complexity,
exactly.
There's a place for it.
Exactly. It definitely doesn't place. I mean, we have a lot of things at Perk that are built in it. Like our admin and our website is built in CodeIgniter. It sucks to look at and maintain and update, at least for us here in the Austin office, but when those things were made, it was made primarily by our team in Bangalore, and it was just like the easiest tool for them to use at the time. So I'll bash on it because, well, it causes headaches for me, but it is also a very powerful tool. So if you want to use it, be my guest. Laravel obviously is my flavor for a while because, well, one, I'm running a meetup for it. Two, I like it a lot and we use it at work. It just got a very nice syntax. But just something to keep in mind, if you're building something that's starting to get huge in scope and a lot of domain logic, you need to follow a lot of patterns and you have the time to be like more methodical, Data Mapper might be something to look into because you just have plain PHP objects. And if you one day are like, we're going to Mongo, whatever, then it's fine. You just update the annotations maybe the most, and you change the entity managers, like the connections that it uses, and it's fine. Or if you're moving from SQL to Postgres or Cassandra or whatever, your objects at the end of the day couldn't care less. They're still going to work how they need to. The entity manager will handle the rest. You're good to go. Active Record, you might have to do a little bit more fiddling with. In Laravel's case, you're kind of covered because it uses the database layer underneath it that is very powerful and has the built-in grammars for MySQL, Postgres, SQLite, MS SQL if you're using Microsoft products. Kudos to you. I can't say I've really actually met anybody that's used Microsoft's SQL Server, but I've heard it's good.
Yeah, it's good. The power, there's a lot of really good tools there.
That's what I've heard. It's just got a little good tools. It's just that it gets avoided because, well, Microsoft and Windows, which, well.
Unless you're in a large company.
Yeah.
Enterprise grade, and
exactly.
Whether you like it or not, it shows up a lot.
It does. And Microsoft's been making a lot of moves recently to what my boss likes to call is be cool, and they're getting like an actual shell in Windows soon, and they're joining like the Open Shell or Open something project with all that. So hey, they're improving the times, they're doing what they need to do. Awesome. And Laravel works for all of it, so whatever, you can bounce from whatever you need to, and it's going to keep on working. But that is the main part I have for you. If you have any questions, would love to answer to the best of my abilities. And I also have a project set up in Laravel with both Eloquent and Doctrine pre-configured, So if anyone's really interested and wants to see some like live examples of using the two, then I can switch over screens. Any question?
This is my first time being at the Laravel Meetup, so I'm glad to be here. There's I've worked with a number of different PHP frameworks, and I hear a lot of buzz about Laravel, so I'm here to kind of learn more about that. I've done Symphony 1, Symphony 2 stuff, and I've noted that there's a number of Symphony 2 components that are in Laravel, so I think that's good. Without getting into any of my background, I see lots of different languages every day, how they do these same things that you're talking about. And one of the things, you've shown me, how you would do queries here, and to use the naughty Microsoft word for me, they have link, and they all do the same basic kind of things. And all that works real nice for real simple queries, like, in the examples. What do you recommend when you got a really complex join or joining a whole bunch of different tables that, it'll make you go crazy thinking about how you would build these things in these kind of situations?
I think Eric would probably be able to answer the best.
So I use Eloquent like really regularly in just, a ton of our pages on our site. But when it comes down to like reporting pages where I am doing like very complex joins, I fall back to SQL. I'll stop using Eloquent for a complex report and write raw SQL because A, it's faster to run, and B, it's faster to write without, like you were saying, like having to think about how they use the database query builder.
Yeah.
So I mean, the Laravel DB class has, you can run raw SQL, prepare statements, all that kind of stuff. So, my advice is to use all the tools.
Yeah, I've solved my problems that you're describing. I just created a view and then grab that. And
Exactly, and that's,
I've done that too.
yeah, I have a friend who works at Samsung, and he actually has brought Laravel into Samsung's like ecosystem with 5.1 becoming LTS, and he actually recently sent me like very dumbed down version of some table structure they have for obvious reasons. And he's like, how the heck do you do this in Eloquent land? And I looked at it, and it is doable doing it in raw Eloquent. You have to really know the internals of Laravel, and I sent him the gist, which I actually am kind of curious if I still have it, of how to kind of override some of the things inside of Eloquent for that specific model to, here it is. So we had this weird, like, a user could have events, but those events were actually available to the user via a, like, join through a group that could also belong to other things. The table structure was obnoxious. But I came up with a few solutions for him, which is, yeah, sorry. So in his example, he had like a users table, and then he had groups, which was just a simple belongs to many of user ID, group ID on the table, group user. You can override the getters that's used to get an attribute in Eloquent by defining a function, in this case called get events attribute. So then if you call events on the object, it will use this function. Which you'd think it would use this events method immediately, but due to how Eloquent maps attributes, it first looks to see if it's an attribute on the database, like as a column. It's not. Then it tries to find a relation, and it is a relation, but it's not a traditional relation. So in this case, it would be a property undefined unless I did this get event attribute. And inside of the get event attribute, all I'm doing is creating a new like states object, because I think groups had states at Samsung. I have no idea. And then I'm just iterating over the groups relationship that I already defined, and then pulling off of that group objects states relationship and merging each of that into the new Eloquent collection, reducing that collection down to only a certain like array of group state IDs in this case, and then I'm just returning the actual event Eloquent object wherein group state ID, those IDs I just reduced down to get. So it's a very hacky solution to Eloquent. The other solution was doing the manual joining, which is available. So in this case, event left join, it assumes the primary table you're selecting from is the events table, or whatever table you specify in the event object. And then it's just left join this one table, and then left join a different table, and then left join, and then left join, and then where users at ID equals this, the ID property, get, and then I'm returning events. I could just put the return at the top of the function and get rid of the temporary variable, but so there's kind of very different ways, multiple approaches to solving the problem. The first one is a bit more hacky. This one's kind of also as hacky, but they both work. Eloquent can support the very complex joins. It just is a bit different way of thinking than just writing the raw SQL statement, as Eric pointed out, or you can use the query builder to build the same SQL for you, which is, if you're used to looking at raw SQL statements, then it's might not be as intuitive, but once you get used to the query builder syntax, then it gets pretty powerful. And if you need to do the functions like date diff, things like that, the query builder does have a raw function built into it, so you can just pass in the raw SQL, and it will pass it into the query builder where it needs to. So, you can use Eloquent if you want to. If you don't, and you, for certain functions, don't need those fancy objects with automagic property mappings and everything like Eloquent, then you can just do the raw query builder and just work with standard class objects and probably get the job done.
Okay.
I hope that answered your question.
Yes, thank you.
Anybody else got anything for me? Want to check out some doctrine shenanigans in the background in actual PHP, or all good?
Do you post I get a little Meetup notification. I'm also active in the straight up PHP user group. Is there descriptions of what, who will be speaking and what the topics will be, or where can I learn about that?
So for this year, this is actually very lackluster. This is more or less the last meetup for the year for Laravel Austin, just because next month there's a event called Austin Web Bash, which is where a few of the meetups, like some of the earlier meetups in Austin, got this great idea to kind of try and get all the tech meetups together for drinks and fun at Buffalo Billiards and 6th Street. So December 8th is when that'll be 7 to 9. We have like basically the whole place booked for ourselves. I'm gonna blast out the like Eventbrite, whatever Evite thing on Facebook and Twitter whenever I have it available for this year. They kind of take forever to get it up. But typically, like next year, we try to start sending out emails. If you're part of the Meetup group on meetup.com, then you'll get an email a couple of weeks or a week before the meetup saying what we're going to be talking about and things like that. We try to get speakers. It winds up usually being myself or Terry talking about different topics that we've either played with or wanted to learn. And occasionally we get other people that speak. Eric, I believe you've given a talk before. Some other people that aren't here tonight have given talks. We, a few months ago, actually had Taylor Otwell, the creator of Laravel, do a Skype call Q&A with us, which was a lot of fun, and obviously one of our more popular meetups for
Yeah.
very obvious reasons. And I have a few other people lined up. I didn't realize the year was this close to the end of it. Kind of got ahead of me. But I have somebody lined up for next year. His name he goes by Fideloper Online. Our Chris Fidel, if you've heard of him. He does the servers for hackers. Look, he just needs some advance because he lives in San Antonio and the traffic between here and there sucks, as we're all aware. But he plans on talking at the meetup soon, so expect that next year. But we try to send that on Twitter and Facebook and on the meetup site. Who's going to be talking about what? If we can get if we have a description for it, we kind of explain what the talk's going to be about. But at the most, we kind of give the title of the talk. In this case, all that I put out because I kind of procrastinated on it / been busy was just my talk title of Active Record versus Data Mapper, which I chose primarily because a few weeks ago that was the big Twitter debate was Active Record versus, and everybody Otwell and all the big PHP names were just bickering back and forth. And
See that tweet last week about from Taylor about if I was going to build Forge with a data mapper, it would be like 1,600 classes or something. Did you see that?
no, I did know that he tweeted something that people responded to with what, but he deleted the tweet.
Oh.
So if it was that one, then maybe that explains it, but I could never actually figure out what he tweeted that everyone was like, what? Like, what are you talking about? But we try to stay on top of who we're getting to talk and put it out there. Terry and I sometimes get a little bit busy. We kind of forget sometimes until the week of, which we're trying to get better about. But typically the meetup site's a very good place as well as our Twitter account.
One other logistics, again, since it's the first time.
No,
I
you're
parked, I parked in the parking barn down there, and
Oh, yeah.
that's kind of expensive. Can you get a break on that? somewhere?
Yes, you can. Whenever you leave, just talk to the young lady at the front desk. Make sure that you park downstairs, and she'll valet your parking for you.
Cool.
I think her name's Kate.
Okay.
Yes, I'm pretty sure you're right. It's kind of hard for me to keep track because it changes so often. Terry and I have literally gone through probably like 4 or 5 different meetup coordinators while we've been here at Capital Factory, so I kind of lose track of names after a while, especially since I suck with names to begin with.
So it's like a parking garage, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, underneath the Omni, there's a parking garage that you can park in, and it usually costs quite a bit of money. But you can get your parking validated by the Capital Factory, and then it's free, which is nice. But
So the company that you work for, what versions of Laravel are you using in production now? And are you using Lumen? And if so, what for API, or what are you using for API?
So we have our main application API is Laravel 4.2, which we're trying to upgrade, but well, it's sizable and it powers all of our mobile apps, so we can't just upgrade it because we need things to work. Another one of our APIs, because we have a kind of like sub company, it's kind of our a separate brand name to put our perk side of things and other people's apps, like third-party apps, called Appsaholic. We have an API for that as well, which is using Laravel 5.1. And then something that I built recently, which is finally getting close to getting implemented across all of our mobile apps and website, is a OAuth 2 server, which I built in Lumen. So we're kind of using just about everything Laravel has to offer, not including their services like Forge and Envoyer. And Lumen made sense for the OAuth server because the OAuth server is very small. All it's doing is it talks to the database, it talks to Redis, which is where we're storing our access tokens and refresh tokens, and it has maybe 1 or 2 controllers and a handful of views to render out login forms, register forms. Do you want this perk application to gain access to your perk account? Well, we already have access to whatever, flow, required stuff. And that's it. So it's a very small thing. We didn't need every single thing that came with Laravel for it, so Lumen made sense to use in this case. We had to make a few tweaks, and I guess you could call them hacks. I don't necessarily consider them hacks, but they kind of are. Because Lumen kind of makes a couple of assumptions on how you're building your application, and if you're not using those assumptions that it makes, you have to make some tweaks for it. For example, it has a lot of things that are pre-configured that you can change based on your environment, your .env file, but there are some things that aren't in the .env file that you need to change, and you have to make some adjustments based on that, which is usually digging into the vendor file to where the config file is, copying and pasting into your own config file, and then in a service provider, just running app config, telling it the config file name, and it knows, okay, I need to use their version of it versus what's bundled with the application. Just different things like that are nuances to Lumen that don't apply to Laravel, are what I ran into using it. And then L4.2 and L5.star. Folder structure is different, both pretty solid. I was actually talking to Taylor a couple of weeks ago, and he mentioned that either Forge or Envoyer, one of those two of his services, is still running on Laravel 4.2. You'd think the guy who made the thing would have all this stuff on the updated, but you're not talking, he's like, yeah, I've still got stuff in 4.2. It's just, it works, and it's solid. I just haven't had a reason to bump it up just yet. I think it's one of his, I think Envoyer's like 4 controllers, and that's it for the application. So it was just like, I don't need to update it. 5's got some very awesome things. The collection object I was talking about has a lot of very helpful functions. There's a lot of the array functions that PHP exposes, array, do, swap, map, etc. He extended that functionality into the collection object that he has. So for example, you can do like collection each and iterate over each object in the array and make changes, things like that, which is very helpful. I've been using that recently for building a reporting API in Laravel 5.1, which has been a challenge, but that's mainly just because reporting is never easy or fun, and I wanted to represent things in a very specific way in JSON, and I just wasn't relenting until it was exactly right. But they're both very powerful. Obviously, you probably want to use 5.1 because it's still getting updates and support, and it's a lifetime version now. 5.2 is semi-close around the corner, and it's got some nice updates to it as well, especially all the collection and array helpers and their dot syntax for keys. Let's see. For example, you have users with tasks. If you want to get every task name for every user, that would probably look something like, you have a user object dot task, but then that task is a array that's just numerically indexed, and there was no syntax to drill into each of those. You could only drill into the first one, or you have to manually iterate over to get it. But now in 5.2, you're getting the syntax ability to do user.task.star.name, and it will automatically go through each task object to grab the name and build an array out of that. That's just the example to give. I have no idea if I'd ever need to use that personally. I won't know until I need to use it, in which case I'll be happy that I have it, but things like that. And 5.2 is going to be, I'm assuming, an LTS. I have no idea how they're going to work 5.2 into the framework now that 5.1's introduced the LTS. I keep working on 5.2's new features and then just support 5.1 with updates and security updates for however many years he decided he's going to do that. 3 years. That's actually a pretty good amount of time with how fast PHP's moving in technology.
It's all based on Symphony's.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah.
It's because Symphony went LTS with their latest.
I did not know the Symphony went LTS with their latest stuff. So that makes sense. And I guess he was getting a lot of pressure on Twitter
There's
as
a lot of
well.
pressure from like, the bigger companies that
Mhm.
that kind of, they don't want to just upgrade.
Exactly, which, I mean, we ran into that between, when I first started at Perk, we were on a Laravel 4.0 installation and 4.2 was already out. And I mean, the differences between just those 4.0, 4.1, and 4.2 were kind of big. The upgrade between the two were simple, but well, when you have a big application, just because it's simple doesn't mean something's not going to go wrong. You don't want it to go wrong because then you don't make money. And that's kind of important if you want to have pay your bills. So we ran into that as well before. And I took the initiative to do the upgrades, and that was fun. Kind of painful with at least how our stuff was set up first. From just 4.0 to 4.1 was painful. Thankfully, 4.1 to 4.2 is just deployed. And we're done. All right, we're gonna do lunch. So, yeah. Oh, they're going. It's nice. Anybody got any other questions? Oops. If not, then I thank y'all for coming out tonight.
Yeah, thank you.
Enjoy, and hope you have a good Thanksgiving. That's the closest holiday going on.